She thought her wedding day would be the beginning of a fairy tale. The dress, the music, the smiles, everything was perfect. But behind the groom's smile, behind the applause of the crowd, a cruel truth was waiting to be revealed. Words whispered at the altar would shatter her heart and expose the darkness of racism hiding in plain sight. This is not just a story of love gone wrong. It's a story of strength, of betrayal, and of courage against prejudice. Stay with us until the end, because her journey will leave you speechless. And if stories like this move you, make sure to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe for more powerful storytelling. She thought this was the happiest day of her life. The dress was perfect, the music was soft, and every eye in the room turned when she walked down the aisle. For a moment, she believed all her struggles, all her sacrifices, had led to this. A future built on love. But just as she stood there, her heart racing, ready to give herself completely, he leaned close, smiled in front of everyone, and whispered words that froze her blood. "Do you really think I love you?" The voice was calm, almost casual, but for her, it was a dagger. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't move. The white man who stood before her, the one she thought would protect her, cherish her, build a life with her, was suddenly unrecognizable. His eyes didn't shine with love. They gleamed with something darker. The guests clapped, unaware of the cruelty hidden behind his smile. To them, he looked like the perfect groom. But to her, he was a stranger holding her hand, while crushing her heart. Why now? Why here? Why would a man bring her to this moment, only to tear her apart at the altar? She wanted to scream, to run, but her feet felt nailed to the floor. In that instant, memories of every warning, every red flag, every uneasy silence came rushing back. Had she ignored the signs because she was desperate to believe in love? Had she blinded herself to the truth, and yet he wasn't done? His whisper turned sharper, his grip on her hand tighter, as if he wanted to remind her who held the power. Behind his mask of charm there was arrogance, contempt, a dangerous kind of control. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure people could hear it. But still, the ceremony continued, vows waiting to be spoken, rings waiting to be exchanged. To the world, it was a fairy tale. To her, it was a nightmare unfolding in slow motion. What happens when the man you thought loved you reveals his true face at the very moment you can't escape? What happens when a wedding turns into a cage? This was supposed to be the day she became a bride, but instead, it became the day she discovered a chilling truth, and that truth would change everything. The morning sun spilled through the small window of her apartment, painting the walls with golden light. She stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the simple pearl earrings her mother had given her years ago. They weren't expensive, but they carried something more valuable: memory, love, and strength. Her name was Amara, a black woman with eyes that carried both fire and tenderness. She had fought hard for everything she had: school, career, dignity. Nothing had been handed to her, yet she wore her struggles like a crown. Today she believed all those battles had finally led to peace. Her hands smoothed the folds of her wedding dress. She smiled nervously at her reflection, whispering, "This is it." Downstairs, neighbors peeked from doorways, offering blessings as she passed. Many had watched her grow up, seen her walk through hardship, and now saw her walk toward what should have been happiness. Children ran beside her car, laughing, their voices filling the morning air. The church bells began to ring. Guests gathered in polished shoes and elegant dresses. Cameras flashed, flowers lined the aisle, and every eye turned to see her. For Amara, it felt like a dream, and standing at the altar was him. A tall, well-dressed white man with a confident smile that seemed to charm everyone in the room. To the crowd, he looked perfect, steady, successful, the kind of man any woman would be lucky to marry. But if you looked closer, his eyes told another story. A flicker of superiority, a shade of control, something almost hidden behind the mask of love. Amara ignored the whisper in her chest, the small tightening in her stomach. Today was not the day to question. Today was the day she had promised herself joy. And yet, something about the way he held his shoulders, the way his friends whispered among themselves in the back pews, hinted that this fairy tale might not end the way she dreamed. The music swelled. The pastor opened his book. The crowd leaned forward, waiting for vows to be spoken. But no one, not Amara, not her family, not even the pastor, could have imagined the words that would be whispered into her ear. Words sharp enough to shatter not just her wedding day, but the life she thought she was stepping into. The words echoed in her head like thunder. "Do you really think I love you?" Her heart sank. For a moment, the world blurred. The flowers, the music, the applause, everything drowned beneath the sound of that single, merciless question. But the ceremony didn't stop. The pastor continued speaking. Guests leaned forward, smiling, waiting for vows. No one else knew. No one else heard. Only her. Only him. Amara forced herself to smile, though her lips trembled. She prayed the ground would open and swallow her whole. When the vows came, his voice was smooth, charming, full of practiced words. "I take you, Amara, to be my wife." His audience sighed in admiration, but every syllable cut deeper, because she knew now the vows were hollow. The man beside her wasn't promising love. He was delivering a performance. The ring slid onto her finger, heavier than iron shackles. Applause filled the room. Camera flashes blinded her. And in that moment, she realized she was trapped. The reception was worse. His family, polished, in expensive suits and glittering jewelry, barely hid their disdain. A white woman at the table leaned in close to whisper to another, eyes darting toward Amara. Laughter followed. She didn't have to hear the words to know what they meant. One of his cousins, wine glass in hand, made a cruel joke about how, at least the children will have some rhythm. The table erupted in laughter. Amara forced a smile that felt like it might crack her skin. Her husband didn't defend her. He laughed too. Hours passed, every moment a slow humiliation. When she rose to greet his colleagues, she caught the flash of a sneer. When she stepped onto the dance floor, whispers followed her like shadows. She thought back to the morning, the neighbors cheering, the children running beside the car. If they only knew what was happening now. But the night wasn't over. Later, when the music dimmed and the guests left, she reached for him, desperate to ask what he meant by those words at the altar. His answer was colder than the night air. "I wanted a wife who looks good beside me, that's all. Don't confuse this with love." Her chest burned. "Why marry me then?" He smirked, shrugging. "Because it's shocking. Because it makes me look powerful. Because people pay attention. When someone like me marries someone like you." The cruelty was sharper than glass. She realized then, she wasn't a bride in his story. She was a trophy, a statement, a possession. The weeks after the wedding brought no relief. At dinner parties, his friends spoke as though she wasn't there. When she tried to join the conversation, they dismissed her words with polite smiles, then turned back to him. Once, one of them casually asked, "So, how does it feel, marrying outside your circle?" He laughed, replying, "Exotic, isn't it?" The word stung. She was not a meal to be tasted, not a prize to be displayed. But to them, she wasn't Amara. She was different. And to them, different was less. Her job interviews suddenly grew colder. Once, she overheard a secretary whisper her new last name and giggle. "She's his wife? No way." It wasn't just whispers. It was doors shutting, opportunities vanishing, invitations never arriving. The world around him was rejecting her, brick by brick, and he watched it all with satisfaction. One evening, when she finally confronted him, her voice breaking, he didn't even look up from his glass of whiskey. "You'll stay," he said flatly. "Do you know why? Because no one else will want you now. You belong here," the words carved into her soul. But inside her something stirred, a fire. She realized she had a choice, to bend beneath his cruelty or to stand tall in the storm. The decision wasn't easy. Nights passed with silent tears. Days blurred into performances, smiles for the world, pain for herself. Yet deep inside, a seed of resistance began to grow. The breaking point came at a gala, a room filled with chandeliers, crystal glasses, and wealthy elites. She wore a flowing black gown, hair braided with golden threads, her presence regal despite the weight in her heart. As they entered, a group of women glanced at her and laughed behind jeweled hands. One even muttered, loud enough for her to hear, "She doesn't belong here." Her husband chuckled, leaning close to whisper again, the same poison he had spilled on their wedding day. "See, this is what you'll always be to them, to me. A mistake." But this time something inside her snapped. She turned, looked him in the eye, and for the first time, she didn't lower her gaze. "No, the mistake was ever believing you." The room froze. Heads turned. Glasses paused mid-air. For the first time, his perfect mask cracked, and in that silence, Amara knew the battle wasn't over. It was only beginning. The gala floor shimmered under golden light, but to Amara it felt like a battlefield. Everywhere she turned, eyes lingered too long. Some were filled with pity, others with disdain. She had grown used to the whispers, the laughter, the sharp stings of mockery hidden behind champagne glasses. But tonight was different. Her husband had been drinking heavily. The more he drank, the more careless his words became. Surrounded by his friends, he spoke loudly, his laughter cutting across the room like a blade. "She only looks like she belongs because I put her in this dress," he sneered, motioning toward her. "Without me, she's nothing, just another face no one would ever notice." The laughter that followed was cruel, ugly, and deafening. Amara stood frozen, her chest tight, her eyes burning. She wanted to run, but running would mean surrender. She wanted to scream, but screaming would give them more reason to mock her. For a moment, the room swayed, the chandelier lights blurring as if the world itself wanted her to collapse. But then, she remembered. The neighbors cheering on her wedding day, the children running beside her car, their faces bright with hope. The mother who gave her those pearl earrings with a trembling smile. They had believed in her. They had celebrated her. They had given her strength. And suddenly, the weight pressing on her chest cracked. The fear that had chained her since the wedding splintered. She placed her glass down with steady hands. Slowly, she walked toward the center of the ballroom. Conversations faltered. Laughter died. Her husband turned, his smirk already forming. But it faded when he saw the fire in her eyes. Her voice carried across the hall, clear, steady, unshakable. "You think you made me? No. You tried to break me." Gasps rippled through the crowd. She continued, louder now, her words slicing through the silence. "You don't love me. You never did. You only wanted me because you thought my skin, my presence, would make you look powerful. But all it's done is expose your weakness." Her husband's face darkened. He hissed through clenched teeth, "Sit down, Amara." She shook her head. For the first time, she didn't obey. "No, I will not sit down. I will not shrink so you can stand taller. I will not pretend to be less so you can pretend to be more." A murmur spread through the crowd. Some eyes softened with shame, others widened with shock. A few turned away, unable to face the truth unraveling before them. Her husband stepped closer, his hand reaching to grip her arm. But she pulled back, before he could touch her. "You wanted to cage me in your world of arrogance and cruelty," she said, her voice breaking, but strong. But you forgot one thing. I don't belong to you. I never did. For a moment, silence swallowed the room. The chandelier light seemed to blaze brighter, reflecting in her tear-streaked face. Then, with trembling hands, Amara unclasped the pearl earrings from her ears, her mother's gift. She held them in her palm, pressing them tightly before slipping them into her dress pocket. She looked at him one last time, her voice soft but filled with steel. This is not the end of me. It's the beginning. And before anyone could, "Stop her!" She turned and walked out of the ballroom. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, each step echoing like a drumbeat of defiance. The doors swung open, and the night air rushed in, cool and liberating. Behind her, whispers erupted, the crowd buzzing in disbelief. Her husband's voice called out, sharp, commanding. But for the first time, she didn't listen. The camera flashes didn't follow her this time. The music didn't drown her out. There was only silence, her heartbeat, and the freedom waiting beyond the door. That night, Amara left with nothing but her courage. No jewels, no car, no arm to hold her steady. But for the first time since her wedding, she felt light. She felt alive. Yet as she disappeared into the dark streets, one haunting question remained. Would the world let her rise? Or would it try to break her again? The city felt different that night. The air was sharp and cold, yet every breath Amara took filled her lungs with freedom. She walked with nothing but her gown, her courage, and the memory of her mother's gift tucked close to her heart. For the first time in months, she wasn't walking behind anyone. She wasn't pretending. She wasn't hiding. She was simply herself, but freedom came with its own battles. The following weeks were not easy. Whispers followed her everywhere. Headlines spun her story into gossip. Bride walks out of gala, marriage in shambles. Some claimed she was ungrateful, others mocked her as weak. But those who knew the truth, those who had seen her husband's cruelty, carried quiet respect in their eyes. His family tried to smear her reputation. They painted her as unstable, too emotional, unworthy of his name. Job doors slammed faster than before, invitations dried up completely, and bills piled high. There were nights she cried into her pillow, wondering if courage had been worth the cost. And yet, she did not return. She did not crawl back. Every morning she rose, wiped her tears, and told herself, I survived worse before. I'll survive this too. She leaned into her community. The same neighbors who had cheered for her wedding now stood by her as she rebuilt her life. They reminded her of her worth when the world tried to strip it away. Children who once waved at her car now brought flowers to her door, small gifts that carried more love than any jewel. Slowly, Amara began to rise again. She found work in a local center helping young women, many of them black, many of them overlooked, discover their voice, their education, their dignity. Her pain became her weapon. Her scars became her testimony. She spoke openly about what she had endured, not to gain sympathy, but to plant seeds of strength in others. Love is not chains, she told them. Love is not control. And if anyone tries to convince you otherwise, you must have the courage to walk away. Even if your feet tremble, word spread. Soon, Amara was not just surviving. She was leading. She organized workshops, spoke at gatherings, and slowly transformed from the woman who had once been mocked into the woman who inspired. And though her husband's name still carried weight in elite circles, his mask had cracked. People remembered the night at the gala. They remembered his arrogance, his cruelty, his silence in the face of truth. His empire did not crumble overnight, but shadows clung to him that he could never wash away. Amara, however, walked in light. Years passed, and the pain of that wedding day dulled. though it never disappeared completely. Some nights she still heard his whisper, "Do you really think I love you?" echoing in her mind. But each time it surfaced, she answered back with her own voice, "No, and I don't need you to." What she needed was already within her. Dignity, strength, love for herself, and love for her people. The pearl earrings remained with her, not as a reminder of the man who tried to break her, but of the mother who had given them in love, and the resilience they represented. She wore them on the days she spoke to young girls, the days she stood before crowds, the days she felt her courage flicker. They reminded her of who she was and who she refused to become. Her story spread beyond her neighborhood. Others came forward, women who had endured silent prejudice, hidden cruelty, and the heavy chains of racism masked as love. Together, their voices built a wave that could not be ignored, and slowly, conversations shifted. Walls of silence cracked. Hearts began to open. Change, small but steady, began to stir. In the end, Amara's story was not just about one woman, or one cruel man, or even one broken marriage. It was about something bigger. It was about the poison of racism, how it seeps into homes, families, and communities, tearing them apart from within. How it makes love conditional, dignity negotiable, and humanity invisible. It was about the courage it takes to stand against it, not just once, not just at the altar or the gala, but every single day afterward. It was about the truth that prejudice weakens everyone, not only the oppressed, but the oppressor too. Because a man who builds his power by demeaning others builds it on sand, and eventually it collapses. And most of all, it was about healing, about unity, about what happens when one voice refuses to be silenced and inspires others to rise beside her. As Amara looked back years later, she knew her wedding day would always sting. But she no longer saw it as the day her life was ruined. She saw it as the day her true life began, because walking away wasn't weakness. It was strength. Standing tall in a room designed to break her wasn't shameful. It was glorious. And living without the love of a man who saw her as less did not make her empty. It made her whole. Moral takeaway: racism destroys families. It poisons. Love blinds hearts and leaves scars that echo across generations. Prejudice weakens communities, turning neighbors into strangers and allies into enemies. But unity, true unity, rooted in respect and dignity, heals. And courage, even when it feels small, even when it shakes, can defeat hate. Amara's story is not just a story. It is a reminder that silence feeds injustice, that shame has no power when truth is spoken, and that courage, no matter how costly, is always worth it.